the Just As We Are podcast. I'm Katrina Lelly, a wife, mom in recovery, certified life and transformation strategist, community cultivator, lover of people, and student of life. Each week, I'll bring you love, inspiration, share the harder things people are afraid to talk about, and guests who are willing to shine their light for you. I give you self-care practices and mindset tips to help you shatter the negative stories you tell yourself. Now is the time to step into the beautiful, loved, whole woman you already are. Let's walk this journey together. Hi, welcome back to the Just As We Are podcast. I'm your host, Katrina Lelly, and oh my goodness, you guys are in for such a special treat today. I am incredibly excited to introduce to you not only my first male guest on the podcast, but my husband, Joshua Lelly. And I just am so grateful to him for agreeing to sit down and have this conversation with me and to share with you guys, a little bit about our story, where we came from, how we met, and, what was it like being married to me, especially in the very beginning. Josh, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with my audience.
Thank you, my wife, Katrina. I am not nearly as vibrant and awesome as my wife. Some people, whatever you want to call it, but I'm here and I am present and I am ready to hear the questions and the digging that my wife loves to do.
Oh my gosh, he's a little nervous. So I just love that he is on here. You guys, he's the one that actually helps me make this podcast possible. He is my number one encourager, but he's also my editor. He edits all of these episodes for you guys so they sound as amazing as they do. And I am grateful for the work that he helps put in behind the scenes in all of this. He is always willing to step up and go out of his way to help me in some way when it comes to this podcast and building my coaching business. And I'm forever grateful to have such an amazing person in my life that is him. I'm sure you've not always thought of it as the most amazing experience, but let's talk about first where we met. And we actually met on Match.com.
Correct.
Why were you on Match.com, may I ask?
I was looking for somebody also.
And I actually got put on Match.com by a friend of mine. I was working at a body shop and she was working at the dealership. And she called me on the phone and she said, Katrina, don't be mad, but I put you on Match.com and there's some really hot guys on there winking at you or whatever it is you do on Match.com. And I jumped on and Josh happened to be one of those guys on there. I remember I had a couple weird dudes on there. One wanted me to go out on a boat on Lake Washington with him for our first date. And when I said no, he was not very appreciative of that. So I'm glad I totally missed that one. But I remember Josh, his picture, he had an orange baseball cap on. He was wearing a jean jacket and he was on a horse. And I love horses. And the picture was kind of further away. And so I didn't get to see him up real close, but we chatted for not very long, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it was a couple of weeks before we actually met face to face. I mean, I think it was like 2 months, or at least, yeah, I want to say it was 2 months before we actually met face to face.
Really? Is it really that long?
Yeah,
I don't see. Here's where he gets me. He could make something up and I wouldn't know because my memory is not very good in the beginning of our relationship.
Facts check. You gotta fact check.
I don't have my Match.com account anymore, so how am I gonna match it? Check it. So we did. We went on our first date. He picked me up at my mom's house in his black Dodge Ram pickup truck, and I was like incredibly nervous. I had not actually been on a date like this in a long time. My first date, the guy took me out and his brother came along and we went to Teriyaki and Waterboy.
It's not a date.
So you were probably my first real actual date. without having known the person, especially beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was quite interesting. That first date, what did we do on that first date?
Let's see. We went out to dinner. Well, went and had some Mexican food, right?
Yep.
Mostly liquid Mexican food.
Margaritas. I have never seen somebody drink their margarita so fast, and I'm the alcoholic in the relationship. We went to Mazatlan on South Hill, had Mexican.
And then after that, we went down and had, played some pool and went down to the firehouse and all ordered. Yep,
and played pool and darts. And shared
and
our first dance.
And I think there was karaoke.
No karaoke. We didn't do karaoke.
It wasn't karaoke?
No.
I thought there was. I know that we danced a little bit.
Yeah, we had our first dance to Tim McGraw on The Stars Go Blue.
Yes.
Yes, and proceeded to get really hammered that night and ended up at Lake Taps, your grandparents' property.
I went swimming. Katrina didn't.
I did not, no.
I went swimming.
It was a late night, though.
And I dropped you off after that.
Yeah, dropped me off afterwards, and we were pretty much almost inseparable since that first date, for the most part.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and our relationship moved very quickly. But, at that time, I was actually just starting to feel comfortable with my dad and his longtime fiance and going to see them. And I was really exploring on rekindling that relationship at the time. And Josh was up camping somewhere with some friends, and we were texting back and forth, and he was going to be stopping by my dad's house on the way back down to meet my dad. Mm-hmm. And that was super nerve-wracking. And the funny thing is, I was talking to my dad and I was trying to tell him who Josh was, and because we went to the same high school together, you guys. Josh graduated a year ahead of me. I had no idea who he was. I look back at his yearbook picture and I still have no idea who he was. So our paths did not cross in high school. And
I remember seeing you in high school, but
that's because I'm just so beautiful. I'm hard to miss.
Yeah. I would have said other words, but
what?
A little bit loud.
Okay.
That's it.
I was quiet.
Loud. No, you weren't.
I was quiet in high school.
Not hanging around with the people that you hung around with.
Okay, if you say so.
And I knew all the people that you hung around with because they went to school at Edgemont, where I went to school with, and they lived right next to me. So
yeah, that's true. I forget about that connection. And speaking of connection, when I was explaining to my dad who this guy is, I'm trying to say his last name. Our last name is Lely. And I'm trying to say Leilani, and my dad pops out with it, and he's like, oh my gosh, I know the Lelys. So our families knew each other from growing up and going to school themselves and had that connection. So my dad knew who his dad was and his mom was and all of that. So really just being such a small world. So we date over the summer. We had a lot of fun, a lot of adventures over that summer, and I moved in with you within a couple of months, 3 months or so.
3 months.
Yeah, 3 months. We met in June, and I was moved in, I think, by September or August. So it was only a few months. It wasn't long. Our relationship went really fast, and he was down on one knee in the sand, down in the Oregon sand dunes in November, proposing to me with a bunch of our friends around us in the dark, because we got to the dunes late, and the proposal had to happen that night.
Yeah, because they had too much stuff, and we had set up a room that was just you and me as a connecting room to everybody else.
Yeah. So there was this plan, and so met in June, engaged by November. In between that, Josh had told me, I think I have a daughter, and I'm pretty sure I have a daughter. It was obvious to me.
I had a daughter, but there was doubt given to me. So that's what we were.
He's very technical, you guys.
We were waiting. Yes, but we're waiting for actual. I was waiting for actual confirmation.
But if you looked at the picture, I knew right away that Haley was his, and there was no denying that. And there was stuff that came up with that. You guys have Also, if you go back and listen to early on episodes, there's an episode actually with Haley's mom and I who share a little bit of our journey because it wasn't always easy. And with that, of course, there's Josh in that too. And I didn't make that part easy for him either.
No.
But so we ended up getting engaged in November. The idea was to plan to get married next June, and I was hoping to be the date that we met, or right around the date that we met. And so June 23rd of 2007, we had set that date to get married, and you called it off.
Yes.
Okay.
There was ultimatums, and I was the one that had to follow through with it, calling it off.
Yes. Something I was very upset about at first, but later became incredibly grateful that had happened. But when you met me, what was it like for you? I mean, did you have any thought in your head that there might be a problem with my drinking?
No, I mean, when I first met you, I mean, in the beginning, I didn't want there to be a problem. I didn't think about it. It wasn't something that you go into, oh, she's got a problem. You go into it open-minded and accepting people of who they are and learning their personalities, not putting a label on them. So, no, I didn't expect you to be an alcoholic and have a issue with alcohol.
Right. That was kind of a silly question, I know.
Yes.
But I wanted to ask.
It is.
It's reality. Because looking back, you could say, well, yeah, the signs were obviously there.
Yeah. I mean, there's numerous things that it's like when you start adding up all the evidence, it's like, okay, there's the assumption. There's this, there's that. And put on a tally mark of the number of times that there was problems. But when you're going through it, it's really hard to draw a line in the sand and to say this is too much.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about like what led up to that point where you and our two friends were in our kitchen having a conversation with me that there's a problem with my drinking and I need to I think it was like, don't drink for 30 days or something like that was the ultimatum. And I couldn't hold my end of the bargain up. What was it like that? Like what led you up to that point?
There was numerous nights of us going out and having a couple of drinks or going to the bar with some friends, and it turned into carrying you to the car or carrying, doing certain things, finding bottles around that I didn't know we even purchased, and I wasn't the one. I remembered everything that we had bought. I remember everything that I touched my hands on. But there was stuff that was winding up in our house that, with alcohol meaning, that I was unaware that our finances were going towards. And I started looking at our bank statements, and I started noticing that we'd be spending $200 in a night for alcohol at a bar. And that's a lot of money when you look at the budget that we're spending on everything else.
That is a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
That is a crazy, even for two people who are just going to the bar to just hang out and whatnot. And I remember oftentimes it was, okay, we're just going to go have a few drinks. But I would be the one that's like, no, let's just have one more. No, come on, let's have one more. Oh, so-and-so's here. Let's hang out and,
have a little bit more.
Exactly. There was always that more of more.
And I was waking up in the morning and going to work, and you weren't making it to work in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
I was getting calls from your boss asking when you were showing up, what happened, is there a problem? So, and the friend that showed up and gave you the ultimatum with me was also working with you, and she was concerned because you weren't showing up.
Yeah.
And so the evidence was more work related and not showing up in the mornings and not getting up and following through with your commitments that you made, and then being distracted, I guess. So different things. Frustration and anger were out there. There was confusion on your side of what happened and when it happened. And
but how are you doing through all this? Like, are you where's your mind at? What are you thinking? What are you?
My mind's going, what the fuck was I thinking? For a lot of it. I mean, why? How far do I go? I mean, what's the line in the sand? What's the line in the sand that I'm not going to allow myself to step over, or should I be making it concrete? How solid of a line is this? Do I stop and walk away? Because growing up, I was once I committed to something, it's about following through with it. Learning those things down in your soul, or learning those things in your mind, and being taught those things from your grandparents and parents, really holds with you. You feel disappointing when you don't follow through with your commitments.
Yeah.
And promises.
And I want to say that's a truth for you, because I didn't have the same type of upbringing whatsoever. There are a lot of things that I was not taught. Things like that, like showing up to work, staying committed to things. Like, there are principles that I didn't get. And I didn't have those things. And so that's something about your integrity that's amazing. And I know that when you say you're going to do something, you're going to do it. Sometimes it takes a little longer than others.
Sometimes it looks different.
But it's gonna happen.
Correct.
So the wedding gets called off after the invites are sent out.
Yes, after the invites were sent out, and after you did not follow through with your staying sober for 30 days.
Yep.
It wasn't fully believed until they saw you the next time you showed up at work.
Yeah. And I want to tell you guys that there is a lot of detail, chaos that was going on during this time that we're not telling you, that I did. My behavior of, the not showing up for work was a big deal. Creating arguments with Josh, throwing my engagement ring at him several times and telling him I'm done, I'm not doing this anymore, purposely causing fights. Like, there was a lot of chaos in detail that we're just not going to go into, but it was not... It
could be a very long story.
It could be a very long story if we went into everything. But it was a very, very messy situation. And so I ended up having to send out notices to people that, for personal reasons, were having to wait on the wedding. Which
a lot of people knew, or some of the people that were really close to us knew and fully understood, and it wasn't that big of a deal. Even our DJ postponed everything that we had already paid for. He postponed until the next time we were ready to go, and he was all great with that.
Yeah, he was fine with that. And there was an incident with the place that we were going to have the wedding, and they ended up getting frustrated, and we lost our deposit on that. Rightfully so. I mean, it was just a lot of different chaotic things. Plus, we had a third-party player who was in the mess, and I was in drama with them during it all. And so it was just chaotic for sure. And then, so we don't get married. We are still living together. There's still a huge problem. I think it's that September is when I got my...
We even went on our cruise that we got.
Oh, yes, we did. That's right. Mm-hmm. We had booked a cruise for our honeymoon to the Bahamas, and we still went on the cruise.
Yep.
And
even that was kind of chaotic, just getting there. Canceled reservations a couple of times with air flights and back and forth, and arguments a little bit here and there. That was frustrating, and yeah. I just knew how to do drama really well and try to manipulate people really well. And so, yeah, I remember I called off I was going to say we're not doing the cruise, and it was back and forth on the cruise, and I got pissed one night and canceled the flights, and then we had to rebook flights and pay more money. And even the trip itself, we had good time on the trip itself, but there was also not such good times. Being in Florida with my brother, even the cruise itself, there was a lot of drinking on the cruise itself. We even talked about getting married on the cruise. Do you remember that? Yeah, we talked about I joked about it, but it wasn't going to be real. I thought it was more of a story. But apparently you thought that was 100% real?
Yeah, I did.
Holy shit. I didn't even know that now. Okay, that's a new one for me.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Your brave soul to go on a cruise with me and still go on that rather than just say, you know what, we don't need the money back. It's fine. After calling off a wedding. And, time keeps going forward and my behavior doesn't change. My drinking's probably gotten worse. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. It's gotten a lot worse. It transitioned from, it went, and it wasn't necessarily that you drank more. This is the worst part about alcoholism. It wasn't even that she drank more. It was as soon as she took a drink, her personality shifted. And that's the one thing that living with it, you see it differently than seeing somebody at a party or seeing somebody at a event. I virtually knew every time she took a drink, even if I hadn't seen it. So there was a personality shift, and it transitioned to something that started getting uncontrollable. Yeah.
And I can totally understand that and relate to that. There's people in my life who I know just by talking on the phone to them. And sometimes I don't even have to talk it through a text message. It could read like a normal text message to anybody else. But I know, like, I get this feeling, this anxious feeling like, oh, there's been alcohol been going on. And so I totally understand that. And we go along. I'm not going to go into details about all my, getting a DUI and all of the instances that happen. But
if you want to hear about that, you can go back and listen to some of the other episodes and you'll be able to hear all that information.
Yeah. Yeah. What I really want to do is just kind of get an idea for people who are in a situation like this, who've never come across this before, maybe, and don't really know what it is, or the signs to look for, or how as you as a spouse, because eventually we got married and I still was drinking. I was pregnant, but I was still married. I was still drinking, and then have the kids and the drinking just picks back up. It slowed down during the pregnancy, but it picked way back up after having kids. And how do you as a spouse come alongside that and continue to be a part of that? How do you feel? Like, what's your feeling? Are you feel so helpless you don't know what to do? Like, what's going on for you as a spouse?
So there was lots of things that I thought about. Took all the events and weighed all the outcomes and said, okay, if I do this, what happens? If I do this, what happens? And so on and so forth. And because I love her, I knew I loved you in a way that was more than just a friend, that was more than, it was somebody that I cared about and somebody that I wanted to spend my life with. I put you at a different level. And especially after having Tristan and Cassidy, I knew you were always going to be in my life no matter what. And then sometimes my mind went to financial reasons. It's like, okay, if we get divorced, what's going to go on? I mean, at what point does that make it better for you and me, or does it make it better for Tristan and Cassidy? So I weighed a lot of things, and until you went to treatment, until you went into your 30 days of treatment, I did not know how to say no. I did not know how. I had to step back. And I had to let the roller coaster go and hope it either flattened out or hit rock bottom.
What was going through your mind when I did make that decision to go to treatment? Because that's a big decision. I'm going to be gone for 28 days. I've already been gone. I mean, realistically, when you're in as deep as you are with your alcoholism that I was not actually present. I wasn't there. Physically, yes, but everything else was gone.
It actually was a vacation for me. Number one, before that, my parents were helpful, and we lived next to my grandparents, so it was benefiting that I had support from family. I also had your mom and dad a little bit. Not nearly as much. I would be able to call them. They liked me.
They do love Josh. Yeah. They really do.
I mean, yeah, a little bit of Hurricane Katrina, causes some drama.
I got that nickname by Josh's grandfather, by the way, before they all realized.
Before they all started calling her Hurricane Katrina.
For the reasons of my drinking.
And if I wouldn't have had that, it would have been a whole different story. It would have been much more difficult. I was still able to continue to go to work every day. Didn't have to take off personal family leave time or anything like that. And it was a vacation because then I didn't have to worry about coming home to Katrina and knowing what mood she was in. Was it drunk or was it emotionally okay Katrina? Because a non-drunk Katrina was not necessarily okay.
No, that's a big reason why I drank.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't emotionally okay. Mm-hmm. And the alcohol definitely made that so much more.
So there was, and she hadn't gotten, it doesn't take it takes an alcoholic a little bit time to level their personalities out to get to a person that they used to be once before.
Yeah. So you laid out the very analytical answer to why you stayed with me.
Yep.
Through all of that.
Correct.
So now I want you to share, why did you stay? Because I've shared with you many a times, I don't think if the roles were reversed, I really don't think I could do it.
Yeah. Having that family principles really has instilled in me that I knew why I loved you. I knew why I originally proposed to you. I knew what our relationship could look like. I know what our family was going to look like. That's why I'm still here. It's because I love you deeply and I have deep roots and following through with what you commit to. But even at the expense of yourself? The religious side of that is, yes, it's not always just about me. It's about what the team can do to be better.
What do you mean the religious side?
So, growing up, I grew up in the church, grew up as Christian. Lutheran family was baptized as Lutheran at Mountain View Lutheran Church. And my family has always been involved in some sort of religious activity, or my dad's side was deeply into the Catholic side. My mom's side, more the Lutheran side. And those kinds of learnings stick with you, especially when you learn them between the ages of 0 to 5. And we know, you and I both know, that whatever you learn in those first years is very, very important. Mm-hmm. And it will instill and be ingrained into you for the rest of your life.
But being that your parents are divorced, and they had gotten divorced before we met. Correct. Did that come into your mind, or
yes,
think about?
I also don't believe in divorce.
Okay.
I also don't believe in divorce at all. That whole making promises, and we stood up there and said, "Till death do us part," and that's firmly what I believe. It will not be my decision to go down to the courthouse and have a divorce written up. I will not write the papers. I will not even sign the papers. Because that's my personal belief.
I love you very much. And I'm jumping ahead, but I've not always thought that I would stay with Josh. I've not always thought I'd stay with you. And we just recently had a conversation about that. And that's not my thinking. And it hasn't been for a while. Mm-hmm. But that hasn't always been the case through our marriage. Even in sobriety, we have had stuff go down.
Oh, yeah. Being sober does not mean it's easier. Yes, that is going through this. I would not have believed it. When you went to treatment, that was awesome. I'm like, it's all fixed. That's all we had to do. She's going to make it out of this 30 days. She's going to be clean. She's going to want to stay that way. It's going to be easy. It's going to be a cakewalk from here out. That was our biggest problem. We're going to save more money because we're not spending $200 a night at the bar. And that's not necessarily the case either. Just because that transitioned and that you went through that did not make it easier. I'll tell you, to be honest with you, some of the hardest road was the next road.
Those first couple of years were the hardest.
Learning new stuff and finding who you were without alcohol, because our whole entire first part of the relationship was questioned to some degree, a lot of degrees.
Yeah.
And was that, we both had to figure out who we actually really were. And I still felt fully committed to, I'm not signing a fucking paper. Sorry.
You're good. So I come home from treatment. Everything isn't magic, rainbows. I'm not magical like you think I am now, but it's all different. And you were angry. You were very angry.
For the next 3 years, I was angry.
Yeah.
You got a fucking 30-day vacation.
Yeah. He was not happy.
It took me the next 3 years to find out that, because I walked into a couple of meetings and that's my expectation was, okay, now where do I find my 30-day vacation that I get somebody to pay for? And there isn't one.
No, and it wasn't even a vacation for me, but that was your perception.
But that's the perception. It's like, okay, you don't have to work. You don't,
Yeah.
But yeah, there is no vacation. Yeah. And there never was a vacation and I didn't fully assume that.
You didn't know, but you were angry. And we ended up actually, I think it was in my second year of sobriety, or was it my first year of sobriety? I think it was my second year.
18 months in.
Yeah, 18 months in, we separated for a very short time, but we separated.
A month, 30 days.
Yeah. We separated, and we really didn't resolve anything over that separation. It was just, I was done, you were angry, and that's when you ended up going to some of your first meetings, correct?
Yeah. Yep.
And
it was in February. My first meeting was on my birthday. My actual birthday. Yeah.
So he went in and got help for himself. And
I didn't know that in the beginning.
And you didn't know that's what you needed.
Correct.
And how did that work for you? Like, what was your take on that? People think they're going to go there to fix the alcoholic.
Yeah, and the weird part is that not all the meetings are exactly the same. There was a couple of meetings that I went to 18 months prior. And so really my first meeting wasn't on my birthday. It was 18 months prior at the same time Katrina was going to treatment. And I don't call those my first times I stepped into Al-Anon because I did not resonate with anything that was going on in that meeting. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it was because I was too angry or too in the wrong. It's just like going in it. And when are you going to decide to be sober? Mm-hmm. So I don't call those my first meetings. So, because I didn't stay, I didn't hear anything, and I couldn't relate to what was going on in those meetings. But walking into the first meetings, it was like, I actually walked in and felt a little uncomfortable. I actually asked one of your friend of ours to help me find one that I would actually show up to and stay because she knew who I was, and found that because I walked in and it was almost like going home for the holidays after being at college. Mm-hmm. And so I walked in and I didn't really say anything, didn't really hear anything the first time. Was offered numerous amounts of information and passed it off to somebody else. I showed back up the next week, and I also went to 2 other meetings that week also, and they were different. And the first meeting that I went to was not my favorite one. It was actually the one that there was another one that connected with me better, which was a bunch of guys.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different ones out there for you that need to be in a recovery program. But you figured out that there was some work for you to do on yourself. And in all of this, what are some of the things that you've really learned about being the person who loves an alcoholic? What can you give to people who are in a similar situation?
Number one, which is one thing that I did terrible at and probably caused more pain to an alcoholic than ever, was anonymity. Anonymity is the ability not, even though you know somebody, you don't know somebody. You don't let anybody know you know somebody. It's almost like going and having your best friend be a professional athlete, but nobody knows you know them. That way they can live a normal life just like you do without any expectations of walking into the room, or they don't, you're protecting their alcoholism, because it was never my place to call you out on that. That was the hardest lesson and the easiest lesson for me to hear.
Don't tell me what to do.
Correct.
Don't tell me I have a problem.
Don't tell everybody else that you're an alcoholic. Don't go walking around telling all your coworkers. Don't go walking around telling your whole family. Don't go walking around. It wasn't my place to say that you were an alcoholic to them. Weird. That's weird to say that, but there is ways to get everybody to understand without you calling it out in that aspect.
Well, people are going to want to know, like, well, how do you get help? Do you have to stand in this alone by yourself?
No, you don't. You don't have to stand. You get to share it with some people. Sharing it with people that are not in the situation. Having the third party is somebody that is not even involved in the situations. It's almost like going to a counselor. I mean, you can go to your priest or your rabbi or your father. He is somebody that is not in your supposed to be in your relationship, that he can lend an ear and listen to you talk your way through your problems. And he does, and we don't even offer solutions. I was able to find my own solution, because my solution is not necessarily what somebody else's opinion is.
And your solution is something only you can find and take care of. You. I mean, the biggest thing I think you learned is, and I didn't necessarily like this at first either, but you are only in control of you. You can only do and handle what's for you. And it's detaching and it's letting go of that situation, because anybody who is me, and not just an alcoholic, but people who are in our situation, don't like to be told what to do. And we both know from experience, because of my situation and because of people we loved, like, it won't change until they're ready to change. And we hear this, they have to hit rock bottom, their own rock bottom. It looks different for everybody.
Correct.
And even you had to hit your own rock bottom to get you into a place where you were willing to go work a recovery program and work on yourself.
Yep, because I was constantly trying the same thing over and over again, expecting things to be different. And they weren't different. They were constantly being the same thing. So the third one that I found was a family. And I say that a different family. It's my family away from my blood family. And I found people that have the same thing as me. Frustrations, and open honesty was the key. Because open honesty for me was people telling me exactly where they're at. Not the, hi, how are you doing? Oh, great, wonderful. Everything's wonderful today. The fake smile. I hate the fake smile. The fake smile is a load of bullshit. My wife is not a fake smiler. There, you can see right through everything. I mean, literally, you walk in the door, it's like that. I think that's one of the biggest reasons why I love her, is because as soon as she walks in the door, I can see exactly her attitude.
I don't always like that.
Yeah, you do. I've lived with you long enough that it's that way. But finding the family to be able to walk back into those rooms with helped me show up every day wanting to be better with them, wanting to also help them. So sharing my story helped numerous amounts of people, and sharing my opinions and sharing my stories in this room with my new family helped me move to a different place. It also helped me re-engage back into the church and the religion that we are currently going to.
Yeah.
And it helped me open my eyes and not be angry as I was. It's not perfect today, but it is drastically different.
Yeah. And, that piece is such a huge part of our story. And there's more to our story as to how we got to where we are today in a marriage that is incredibly solid and just really, we are both dedicated to being the best of ourselves and coming together. It's a work in progress. Like, we have a lot of room for improvement, and we've done other avenues, other personal development type things. You guys know that I'm always working on something for myself to be the best that I can be, because there's so much uncovering when you start to take a look at yourself or even your marriage or a relationship. It's not all of a sudden you're open and everything comes out. It's peeling back the onions. It's a process. It's because you grow, you change, your ideals become different. You come into a relationship with new people, you have new experiences, and so it brings up new things. And our marriage has not always been easy, even in sobriety. There are times where I was determined that we were not going to be together anymore. And that's because of the place that I was in, the headspace I was in was not healthy. Because I pulled away from God, I pulled away from you, I pulled away from working on myself and being truthful and honest in a way that I am more committed to being today. I've been down that road. You've been down that road with me. We've both been down that road where, while I haven't had to pick up a drink in a really long time, and I choose not to do that every day, there was still insanity in our relationship and in our marriage. And, we're both pretty committed to making the best of what we can, doing more than making it the best, just like having a thriving relationship. There's room for growth. Would you not agree?
Huge amount. I mean, there's numerous amounts of things that we can do. And I know a lot of people like to use the term peeling back the onion because it gives you the illusion. And I personally don't like that term because it gives you the illusion that there's a middle where you can get down to nothing. Because as soon as you peel back, I prefer to think it as a potato, because you can chop it up into a bunch of different slices, but that potato has eyes that are going to regrow another plant out of them. And it's going to look different. And it's going to continue to sprout off potatoes out of that are going to have other things that you can either use, or you're going to have to chop them up and get rid of them and change that plant again. And that wasn't, somebody actually shared that with me. They didn't like it, and I thought that was kind of awesome.
I like that. I don't think you've ever shared that with me.
No, and there's a lot of things. And even though Katrina and I live in the same house and all those things, I still protect people's anonymity. There are people that have shared me that Katrina and I know that I have never shared with her, and there's things that Katrina has protected from me that we know people directly right there. So it's not that I'm keeping anything from her. It's just not my story to tell her. Yeah, it's not my business. That's one of the biggest things I've learned, and I'm still working on. It's not my business. Because sometimes I still want to get up in the business. That's that old behavior, that old dramatic type thinking. I need to know, and I don't really need to know. But I just want to tell you, and I tell you this, often, that I love you so very much. And I'm so grateful that you were willing to come on and share your side. You haven't ever shared it in this manner with anybody. We've talked about it. There's a couple people that I have shared with, but...
Yeah, but we haven't, you haven't come out and publicly really talked or shared. Like me, I'm very open with my sobriety, with my recovery, with all of the personal work I'm always doing and working on.
Yep.
And I'm sharing with. Is there anything else that you want to share with everybody?
I want people to know that you're not the only one out there. I mean, reality is everybody has different situations. And yes, all the maps and all the circumstances and all the details are different, but they're so able to be understood, heard, and worked on. And there's somebody out there that is willing to listen if you ask. The hardest, the biggest step, and the most gratifying step is asking somebody. Once you're able to find the right person to ask, it does change your life. It does change your circumstances if you want it.
I love that you shared that, because that's one of the things that I'm so big on, is that we're not alone. And the more that we talk, the more that we share our stories with people, we find out that we aren't alone. There's different experiences that actually happened, but there's such a commonality between how we're feeling or what we're thinking or what we think's going to happen, all of that thing. And we're not alone. And the more we speak up, the more we'll find that out, and the more free we can come when we do that. Thank you for coming on and sharing your side of the story.
You're welcome.
With everybody. You guys, if you loved this episode, which I know you did, this is one to absolutely share with your friends and your family and your networks. Tag me at Katrina Lelly on social media. You can find Josh on there too as well. I'll put his stuff in the show notes. You guys, I love you, and thank you so much for being a part of our journey with us and for spending this time with us. Wait, don't stop listening yet. Just as we are, fam, I so appreciate my listeners. And you know what would be so incredibly awesome? Is if you just took a few moments, headed on over to iTunes, and left me a 5-star review of the show. And if this episode resonated with you, share it with your communities. Tag me at Katrina Lelly. My message, my mission doesn't get out there without your help. Until next time.